most, and how people perceive you, from my neighbors to relative. Everybody says my husband has gone mad and he's not able to do anything, and that hurts, and that's something I've learned to live with. I have nothing but to just blame my fate, and that there's nothing I can do to change it. The only good thing that has happened since his return is that we are able to live together as a family in the same place. I'm glad that he's home, he's alive, and my children have their father back. We have each other by our side, and I have a shoulder I can cry on, and we can share with each other the struggles and the pains that we are going through as a family.
Subhash, what do you make of what you've been through? I mean, this utterly surreal, bizarre experience of being declared dead, your family grieving for you, then coming back. What do you make of that?
After all that's happened to me and everything that I have been through, I somehow feel even stronger and have more conviction that I will be able to do anything I want to. I still have this burning desire to work. I have the courage, I can do it, and I have been trying very hard. Sometimes I look at my children, there is a real anxiety and depression that I might not be able to provide for them. Sometimes that does drive me mad, but I am extremely happy to be with them, my children and wife. I know that I am their support, and they are also that for me.
Subhash and Santoshi Tamang speaking to me from their home in Nepal. If you have any comments about the story, we do always love to hear from you. Our email is outlook@bbc.com. We're back in a moment.
This is the BBC World Service. Now here's something to think about.
When someone has a brilliant idea, it's a light bulb moment. But then they have to prove their theory.
We have conducted experiments in many so-called small-scale societies, from the Peruvian jungle to Pacific Islands.
I'm David Edmonds, and in The Big Idea, I'll be examining new research on human reason and rationality.
And what we found was that the more people elaborated, the more they also changed their views.
When you ask people who have recently married whether their marriage will end up in divorce, they normally say close to 0, even when the divorce rates are close to 50%.
Men tip 23% more than women tip.
I found some of the most fascinating ideas around and the people who thought them up.
The Big Idea, Sunday at 14 GMT.
Next on Outlook, a funk music quest. When Michael Rubenstone moved to LA, the music of Sly and the Family Stone got him through his early days. And that inspired Michael to track down the band's reclusive lead singer. But fame hadn't been kind to Sly, and pretty soon Michael was warned off his quest.
It's like the Wizard of Oz. You don't want to see the Wizard of Oz.
So did Michael dare pull back the curtain? Find out after this.
BBC News with Justine Green. Chancellor Angela Merkel has extended Germany's coronavirus lockdown until the end of January. She's also announced much tougher rules on social interactions and placed travel restrictions on badly affected areas. Britain's statistics agency estimates that 1 in 50 people in England were infected with coronavirus last week. The figure is substantially higher than previously. In September, it was 1 in 900. Britain as a whole has registered more than 60,000 new coronavirus cases, a record daily figure. The leading COVID expert with the World Health Organization says there's no sign that the variant identified in South Africa is any more infectious than the strain spreading rapidly in Britain. Maria van Kerkhove has previously said that the mutations can be controlled with measures already in place. 2 crunch runoff elections are taking place in the southern American state of Georgia, votes that will heavily influence President-elect Biden's ability to enact his agenda. His Democratic Party must gain both Senate seats from the Republicans if it's to control the upper house. There have been conflicting reports on an airstrike in central Mali. France says it killed dozens of terrorists, but villagers say the dead were guests at a wedding, including children. The new Congress has been sworn in Venezuela, putting President Nicolas Maduro and his party in control of all national institutions. At the same time, the opposition leader Juan Guaido held his own swearing-in ceremony for MPs from the old Congress, elected in 2015. He boycotted last month's elections. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has said coronavirus will preclude any plans Donald Trump might have to come to Scotland later this month as Joe Biden is sworn in. There's been speculation Mr. Trump might visit one of his Scottish golf resorts, but Ms. Sturgeon stressed that with COVID, non-essential travel is not allowed. BBC News.
Hello, you're with Outlook, the home of extraordinary personal stories on the BBC World Service. I'm Emily Webb. Now, sometimes there are those days that just make you question everything. For Michael Rubenstone, that day came in his early 20s. He just started out as an actor, and he was struggling.
In 2001, I was in New York City, that terrible day of 9/11. I was in Brooklyn, and I literally watched the towers fall. I just graduated from college, and I had recently broken up with my girlfriend. And so I was just in a really down place and struggling to find a purpose.
Michael thought that he really needed a change.
Well, and I decided to leave New York and give LA a shot. I threw all my stuff in a car and drove cross country. Multi-gender, funk, soul, rock, gospel group. It just really hit me in that place, that place. Just listening to those songs and hearing that joyfulness kind of got me out of my depression.
And when was it that you started to think more, not just about the band, but about the lead singer?
I have a fascination for rock and roll recluses, people that were at the top of their game and somehow just sort of vanished. Sly has a special place because the music that he created, especially in the early years, was so powerful. And then just suddenly gone.
So when was the last time he'd been seen?
I believe the last time he had been seen really was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993.
So did you start to read more about him and kind of realize that he had just sort of disappeared?
Yes. I started doing some research when I got out to LA and sort of got it in my head. Where is he? I know he's somewhere in this town. Where could he be? Maybe I'll pick up a camera and give this a shot. I was finding my footing as an actor out here in Los Angeles, which is not easy. You have some time on your hands and you start to think about what's important to you and maybe starting your own project.
And so you decided that your project was going to be finding Sly Stone.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of what I landed on. I figured out it'll be easy. He's probably right up the street. I'll just knock on his door. No problem.
So in case you didn't catch it, Michael decided he was going to track down the reclusive rock star and frontman of the Family Stone, Sly Stone, and ask him for an interview and make a documentary about his life. And had you ever made a documentary before?
No, I had never made a film before.
At the time, Michael had a friend who was working as a private investigator, and he gave him some addresses, places he thought Sly might be living.
Turn straight left on the Summer Ridge Drive.
Came across this last address in the Hollywood Hills.
Should be where Sly Stone lives.
And I pull up to this...
That's it.
This mansion.
Is he pulling in the driveway?
Suddenly, someone was pulling into the driveway.
Oh, my God.
I went up to this guy. I said, did you happen to know if Sylvester Stewart or Sly Stone lives here?
Oh, well, you said I thought it was Rocky.
No, not Sylvester Stallone. Sly Stone. He was a funk musician. I'm looking for him. He told me no, and he had never heard of Sly Stone or Sylvester Stewart.
It was a dead end and an early disappointment, but it didn't put Michael off. He started to make contact with anyone who might be able to help him find his musical hero.
It changed my life, really. I met people in the music industry. I met agents. I met managers. I met hustlers and drug dealers and pimps and other rock and roll icons. I would chase down any lead I could get.
And he found people who were just as touched by Sly's music as he was.
I can't imagine my life without Sly Stone. Everyday people is a integral element of every speech I give. The dignity and sanctity of everyday people.
He created a sound that had never been heard before.
And having men and women together, and not with women standing in the background and singing their doo-wahs, so women out front.
And then, a year and a half into his search, Michael got a big break. He connected with Sly's brother, Freddie, who's also a reverend, and his sister, Vic. They were in a Sly and the Family Stone tribute band, Funk Family Affair.
Reverend Stone. The man. Unbelievable, man. It's great to be talking to you.
They invited me to come to church.
Is it in your hometown? Is that where your church is?
So why come to church?
Well, you got to go where it all began.
Thank you so much, Freddie. I really appreciate this, and I can't wait to meet you. I just talked to Freddie Stone.
The Bible says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one."
I'll never forget the first time I stepped into that church, because to hear Freddie Stone sing a gospel hymn and wail on his guitar.
So what did they tell you about Sly when you met them? You know, where did they say that he was?
They're in a position where they don't know exactly where he is or what he's up to on a daily basis.
You know, he lives up in the hills, in Beverly Hills. Okay, he has his place, has his little studio, and he's doing okay.
Everything Sly does is in a certain timing, and I don't disrespect that.
So by the time you met the family, you'd been searching for about a year. What did you learn about the way that Sly had changed as a person over time?
Fame is a really, really difficult thing when you're a sensitive personality that is susceptible to different influences, drugs or alcohol, or just getting caught up with the wrong people. Things can go bad really fast. We're talking about Sly Stone in the 70s in LA. That's a recipe for disaster.
The search continued, but as he went on finding people connected to Sly, they started to warn Michael about what he was doing.
Do you think I have a chance to get an interview with Sly?
I think you'd be better off not.
How so?
Because he'll only disappoint, probably. It's like the Wizard of Oz, you know what I mean? You don't want to see the Wizard of Oz.
Don't let yourself in for the grief. It isn't worth it.
But did Michael listen to those warnings? No. So you had this idea for luring Sly Stone out of hiding. What was your idea?
So my idea was, why not put on a concert with Sly Stone's sister's tribute band in LA, where I knew Sly was, and see if he would come out.
Okay.
That was my idea.
I mean, it's bold.
Yeah.
I'm your mama, I'm your daddy, I'm your doctor.
So your idea was that if he knew that his family were performing together, that maybe he'd want to come and see it?
That's right. It was a long shot, but what else did I have to lose?
So you find a venue.
Yep.
How do you advertise the event?
I went kind of crazy for about a month.
Yo, Monday Night Knitting Factory, original members of the band.
I just started street teaming. I made signs, and I was running around Hollywood. I created flyers. I made T-shirts. Honk if you love Sly and the Family Stone, you know, and I had people honking. And I was running down the streets, handing out flyers, big show, Monday night, come on out. It was exhilarating.
Have you seen him lately?
Not lately.
No, neither have we.
In my dreams.
Yeah, in my dreams too, believe me.
What did your friends and family make of you doing this?
They thought I was nuts. They thought I was absolutely, just bonkers, and I highly recommend doing things like this that are crazy and ignore people that tell you you're nuts, because you're doing it for a reason. And I was doing it for a reason. I wanted to resurrect Sly Stone.
Tell me about the night of the performance.
We had a full, packed house. I think
so it worked?
It worked. It worked. I mean, I'll tell you. And it was almost time for the band to perform, and it wasn't looking good. And then I heard some rumblings like, come out to the loading dock. And I run out there and I see this 3-wheel Harley Davidson sort of pulling down the alleyway. And it's dark, but I see in the distance it's Sly. Couldn't believe my eyes. But yeah, Sly Stone came to my show.
So how exciting was that?
I mean, that was my first Sly sighting, and to see him in the flesh was something I'll never forget. You know, he was dressed in full camo, and he had a motorcycle hat on that looked kind of like a shining orb, and he never took it off the entire show. It was very Sly.
So the show begins, and you were thinking that you wanted to speak to Sly at the end of the show. So tell me what happened.
Well, I was so thrilled that I ran around and celebrated with my family and my friends. And I'd say maybe about 5 songs in, some PA came rushing up to me and said, "Sly's leaving." And I said, "What?" You know, I was expecting him to at least stay for the show, if not maybe get up and perform a song or two. And I just ran out to where the loading dock was and got there just in time to see his motorcycle pulling out into Hollywood Boulevard.
I can't judge what's happening right now. I don't know what's happening right now. I'm sort of like, why did he leave? What happened? Why didn't I get to meet him?
What was that like?
I still to this day don't know exactly how I was feeling. I was so happy that he came out and felt like I really did sort of give him a gift and I didn't bug him.
Just missed him like that because of a flinch, man, but it is out of respect.
But I do regret not at least introducing myself and saying, I'm the guy that did this and you're my hero.
I mean, some people would say, you know, he doesn't want to be found, just leave him alone. Did you not think it was sort of disrespectful? He had left the limelight for a reason, to keep hunting him down in a way.
Yeah, that had certainly occurred to me. You know, maybe this guy really just does not want to be found and leave him alone.
So is that what you did decide to do?
No. I had been working so hard. I could not stop. I was sort of obsessed at that point. Whether Sly liked it or not, I was going to finish this thing.
So Michael had one last idea for getting an interview with Sly, offering him $5,000 to sit down and talk to him. Michael was told through a middleman that Sly agreed. The interview would be happening at last. Did you have $5,000?
No.
Okay, how did you get it?
I scraped my bartending money together. I hit up some friends. I think I probably hit up my parents.
I'm going back to LA broke, my friend. No, I don't want a printed record.
And you went to do that interview. What happened?
A lot of just waiting around in a hotel room to the time where he was ready. A lot of suspense.
And did he ever show up?
Yeah, he did. But it just didn't go according to plan.
So he didn't do the interview?
I did not get the interview.
And what happened to your $5,000?
I don't know.
Continuously. He got a girlfriend, a dog, and better acting work. But then, in 2015, after working on the film for more than a decade, he heard about a Sly and the Family Stone convention in Oakland, California. He was reluctant about going, but eventually thought,
why not? I know he'll be there. Maybe I can finally talk to him.
So how did you feel when he just walked through the doors of the convention after all those years?
I was thrilled. You know, I'm still a fan. And he looked good that day, and he felt good that day.
There was a Q&A at the convention. You decided to ask a question. What did you say to Sly after all those years?
I didn't plan anything. I just wanted to speak from my heart.
Sly, Michael Rubenstone, director of On the Sly.
I said hello. I told him who I was.
Working on for 10 years now.
And I just said thank you.
Changed my life forever. And what you created with this band is so unique and special.
And I also gave him a little nudge, you know, just sort of saying, hey, buddy, you know who I am. And I know that there's more in you than you put out. And you can do it,
You can make it
but you gotta try.
if you try.
You can make it if you try. Instead of replying, Sly gave Michael a sort of salute as people clapped. So in the end, they didn't exchange any words, and for Michael, Sly's voice just lives on through his music. And how did you feel after you'd said that to him?
Relieved. I felt like a huge weight was lifted.
So you went on this huge, over a decade-long search to find your musical hero. What do you think you did learn from that process?
Don't ever stop pursuing your dream. Don't ever quit, no matter what the obstacles are in front of you. I never quit. I never stopped. Or to quote Sly, you can make it if you try. But you have to try. You have to keep trying.
You can make it if you try. Michael Rubenstone speaking to me from California in 2018. The clips you heard were from his movie On the Sly in Search of the Family Stone. Outlook's back tomorrow, same time, same place. Bye for now.
Welcome to Witness History on the BBC World Service. I'm Ibby Caputo. As the Trump administration prepares to execute more people on death row, I'm taking you back to the 1990s when Buddhism was finding its way into the U.S. prison system. Today, the story of a Buddhist on death row.
I'm pretty rare in the Buddhist community. I mean, here's a death row inmate, a Buddhist. That's kind of like a virgin prostitute. They're very rare.
In 1984, Frankie Parker, who was addicted to drugs and alcohol and going through a bitter divorce, kidnapped his ex-wife and murdered her parents. He also shot and injured his ex-wife and a police officer. Parker was sentenced to death in the southern American state of Arkansas. It was while on death row, and in fact, while in the hole or solitary confinement, that Parker converted to Buddhism. Anna Cox is a Buddhist and a psychotherapist who got to know Parker well.
He was a real mean guy, and he told me a lot of stories of all the horrible, bad things he did. And so Frankie was thrown in the hole again, and so you can only have one book, and it's supposed to be a spiritual book. And Frankie said, "I want my Bible." The security guard picked up the Dhammapada book that somehow he had there, and he threw it in the cell and then slammed the door, locking him in, saying, "Here's your damn Bible."
In the southern USA, where most people are Christian, denying someone a Bible could be considered an insult. The book the guard threw in, the Dhammapada, is a collection of Buddhist teachings.
So Frankie picked it up and started reading it because he had nothing else. I think he grumbled for a while. And then for 30 days, he was immersed and he memorized the Dhammapada. And when he came out, he said he was totally changed.
Frankie Parker told reporter Michael Hiblin from the Little Rock public radio station KUAR that the very first verse of the Dhammapada struck him.
Maybe it was the frame of mind or the time in my life where it just made sense, and I read it and I said, that's me. They're talking about me here. And the verse was, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we make the world. Speak or act with an impure mind, and trouble will follow you as the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. And the twin verse to that is, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you like your shadow. And the first verse said, that was me. Polluted, alcohol, drugs, and it led to this.
At first, Parker didn't know any other Buddhists, but then he read in a newspaper that Anna Cox would be giving a talk on death and dying at the Ecumenical Buddhist Society in Little Rock. As a psychotherapist, Anna Cox had worked with people who were terminally ill. Parker sent her a letter.
And he wrote and said, I'm on death row and I have my execution date set. Can you come and help me die? So I wrote back to him a couple times, and then I started visiting with him.
During the 3 years that she visited Parker, Anna Cox got to know a lot about death row in Arkansas.
You know, this is a community of people that live together for 10 and 15 and 20 years, where the only people they ever see are the 42 guys on death row. And back then, there were cells that had the capacity to see, whereas now they're in isolation behind steel doors. And they could call out to each other, and they could play games. They'd play chess, where they'd each have their homemade chessboard, and say they're playing chess with the guy down the hall. They'd throw their little note on, tied to a string. Each cell would pass their note down till it got to the person it was meant to, and they'd write their next move on it, and then you'd pull it back in, and they'd each adjust their chessboard for the next move. A chess game could last a year because it was a rather slow process. And they were brothers.
At first, Anna Cox visited Parker about once a month, but soon she started visiting him weekly.
And there are many, many other people from the Buddhist Center that were going to visit with Frankie. He was so popular. It was just the funnest thing you could do was go see Frankie for a visit.
So why was that? What was it about Frankie? Was he just a dynamic person?
He was just, what was it about Frankie that everybody wanted to go see him? He was funny, he was charming, he was very, very smart. Everybody laughed. It was just a raucous visit. And he was very insightful.
A good Buddhist practices death, you know. When I go to sleep at night, I say, okay, you're closing your eyes. This is what it's like when you die. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Because you actually started dying the day you were born. I mean, the second. The first breath you inhaled, that was life. And when you exhaled that, you started dying. And it's hard to do, you know. You just try to get ready for it, try to be accepting.
Parker's story reached far beyond the prison walls and the Little Rock Buddhist community. Hollywood actor Richard Gere tried to visit him, but he was denied access by the prison. Both the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa wrote letters to the state governor seeking clemency for Parker. But when Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee took office, his first official act was to advance Parker's execution date by 6 weeks. KUAR reporter Michael Hiblin interviewed then-Governor Mike Huckabee about his decision.
This represents the taking of a life not by Mike Huckabee, the individual, nor by a group of citizens, but by all of us collectively as we have written our laws, and they have stood the test of time, and we're simply carrying out that which we resolved as a society to do.
After 12 years on death row, Frankie Parker was executed by lethal injection on August 8, 1996.
We had set up a tent outside of the prison, and we said prayers while the execution was going on. But at that point, these men in that community on death row were heartbroken. They'd lost their dear friend. And then I was flooded with letters saying how traumatized they were and how awful it was.
She decided to become certified as a prison spiritual advisor and then began visiting the other men on death row. She'd go cell to cell till 9:30 at night, till she wore herself to a frazzle. But she would visit every guy on the row who wanted to see her.
I'd go in that unit, and they'd be laying around and chatting, and I'd go in, and it would be like a pin could drop. It was so quiet. Because they'd sit there and they'd wait for their turn to maybe chat about something or unburden themselves with heavy trauma. Tears were a regular event, or they wanted to meditate. So the others would be quiet. The others were respectful because they knew their turn would come. And then they would get to have an environment that was sacred, truly a sacred environment on death row.
Anna Cox went on to co-found the organization Compassion Works for All, which teaches meditation and conflict resolution to men who are incarcerated in Arkansas. She also began a newsletter called Dharma Friends to help people in prison have compassion for themselves and others, and to accept responsibility for their lives. She was speaking to me, Ibi Caputo, for Witness History from the BBC World Service. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to the BBC World Service, and here's what's happening in the studio this week.
Wallace and Gromit are one of Britain's best-loved comedy duos. Traditionally modelled from plasticine clay, hear what happens as the team at Aardman Animations put the finishing touches on their first app, The Big Fix-Up, where fans can step inside the world of Wallace and Gromit as never before.
In the studio, today at 23:30 GMT. And in 30 minutes, Sport Today with Ed Harry.
Jose Mourinho says it's his biggest test since taking over at Tottenham. Win tonight's semi-final against Brentford and Spurs will be through to the League Cup final, a competition that he's won on 4 previous occasions when it proved to be a stepping stone to greater things.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
At 19 hours GMT, welcome to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. Hello, I'm Valerie Sanderson. In the US state of Georgia, a runoff election for 2 seats is taking place, which will decide whether the Democrats or Republicans control the Senate. The coronavirus lockdown is extended in Germany. Chancellor Angela Merkel explains why.
Contacts have to be reduced even further, because we've seen in the past few weeks that we haven't been able to reduce the number of cases as much as we wanted.
An embrace marks the end of a dispute which saw Qatar isolated by Saudi Arabia and its allies. And the world's music festivals try to work out how they can take place this year despite the pandemic, with some countries offering help if plans are disrupted.
Other countries like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, they've turned around and said, well, actually, if you have to close because of COVID, we will pay all your suppliers and artists.
After this news update.
Hello, I'm Justine Green with the BBC News. Chancellor Angela Merkel and the leaders of Germany's 16 states have agreed to extend a coronavirus lockdown till the end of the month. The lockdown, which had seen schools and non-essential shops close, had been due to expire on Sunday. The leaders also agreed to strengthen measures, restricting the number of house guests to 1 and limiting movement in badly affected areas to a 15-kilometre radius from home. Mrs Merkel explained the reasons.
We haven't been able to lower the number of cases over the past weeks, and the new mutations make it unclear how the situation will develop. Therefore, all citizens must limit their contacts to an absolute minimum.
Britain's Statistics Agency estimates that 1 in 50 people in England were infected with coronavirus last week. The figure is substantially higher than earlier in the pandemic. England and Scotland have begun new lockdowns due to high infection rates, driven in many areas by a more contagious variant. More than 60,000 new coronavirus cases have been registered in Britain, the largest number to be announced on a single day. But the Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the vaccination was also picking up speed.
This afternoon, with Pfizer and Oxford AstraZeneca combined, as of this afternoon, we've now vaccinated over 1.1 million people in England and over 1.3 million across the UK.
The leading COVID-19 expert with the World Health Organization says there's no indication that the coronavirus variant identified in South Africa is more transmissible than the one spreading rapidly in Britain. Last week, Dr. Maria van Kerkhove described the mutations as a wake-up call, but assured that they could be controlled with measures already in place. She said the anti-COVID vaccines were a powerful element in a toolbox of measures that would help to end the pandemic. Two pivotal US Senate runoff elections are taking place in Georgia as state President-elect Joe Biden won by just 11,000 votes in November. Today's outcome will determine how easily he'll be able to push through his legislative agenda once he enters the White House. Democrats must flip both seats to take control of the Senate. Keeping one will allow the Republicans to stymie Mr. Biden's program. Nomi Iqbal has been following the campaign in the southern state.
In the last few days, it has become quite a bitter contest because both parties have been attacking each other. The Republican candidates, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, accusing the Democratic candidates, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, of being socialists, of being radicals. They keep using that word, whereas the Democratic candidates keep calling the other two corrupt. They all know that this may be a state election, but it has huge implications on a national level.
World News from the BBC. Reports from Mali say more than 20 people were killed in an airstrike at a wedding party on Sunday. Villagers said a low-flying helicopter opened fire on the ceremony in the central Mopti region. Separately, France says it killed dozens of Islamist insurgents in an airstrike in central Mali. French military sources said the strike was carried out after detailed research and tracking of the jihadists and that no wedding was involved. 5 French soldiers have been killed in suspected jihadist attacks in Mali in recent days. The United Nations has started to move some of the 56,000 Ethiopian refugees in Sudan into a new camp as the existing one is nearly full. The UN Refugee Agency said refugees are continuing to flee into eastern Sudan, with 800 arriving since the new year. The new arrivals speak of continuing conflict, looting, forced recruitment and sexual violence. The federal government says it has won the war with the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. Venezuela's new Congress has been sworn in, leaving President Nicolas Maduro and his party in control of all national institutions. Almost simultaneously, the opposition leader Juan Guaido held his own swearing-in ceremony broadcast online for MPs from the old Congress elected in 2015. The body voted last year to remain sitting until democracy was restored. Mr. Guaido is recognised as president by more than 50 countries, including the United States. Scotland's First Minister says Donald Trump shouldn't travel to the country to play golf. Nicola Sturgeon was commenting on reports that the outgoing US president was planning a golfing trip to Scotland to avoid the inauguration of Joe Biden as his successor.
I've no idea what Donald Trump's travel plans are, but we are not allowing people to come into Scotland without an essential purpose right now. And that would apply to him just as it applies to anybody else. And coming to play golf is not what I would consider to be an essential purpose.
BBC News.
It's 19:06 GMT. You're listening to the newsroom. I mean, how is that playing with the voters, do you think?
That is a concern for Republicans here, that President Trump's voter rhetoric about voter fraud might depress turnout, and even some within the Secretary of State's office fear that because he's held on to this message that the vote was stolen from him, that he won Georgia even though he did not, that there are people now who believe among the Republicans in Georgia that their vote doesn't count and they don't need to come out and vote in this election. And even at President Trump's rally yesterday in North Georgia in Dalton, when he mentioned David Perdue and he mentioned Kelly Loeffler, the crowd has started to chant, "Fight for Trump, fight for Trump." So they feel that they have not been sufficiently supportive of President Trump's effort to try and turn the election in favor of him, and some of the Republican base might not turn out to vote for the two Senate seats here because of their dissatisfaction with what happened in the presidential race.
And I mean, this is crucial, isn't it, this runoff?
It is absolutely critical, because if the Democrats take both of these seats, they will have control of the U.S. Senate, and that will be a 50-50 between the Democrats and Republicans, and the Vice President Kamala Harris will be able to cast a vote to break a tie. If the Republicans keep even one seat, then they have majority control of the Senate, and they will effectively frustrate President-elect Joe Biden's legislative agenda. They will make it hard to pass any signature legislative achievements, and essentially make it sort of like President Obama's term, when the Republicans, Mitch McConnell leading them, tried to block every single thing he tried to achieve, and that's what they intend to do if they win at least one of these seats. There's a possibility that they could even win both and hang on to both of these seats, and it will make it significantly harder for Joe Biden to pass anything, even criminal justice reform, something as simple as passing extra support for those who've been suffering because of the coronavirus and the way it's wrecked the economy.